Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the book of Ezra. And this is a story that's not just about rebuilding a temple, right? It's about a people trying to rediscover who they are after being scattered for generations. So let's jump right in.
So where does this all kick off? Well, not in Jerusalem, but right in the heart of the mighty Persian Empire. After 70 long years in exile, the Jewish people get this world-changing decree from King Cyrus himself. And get this, it's not just, hey, you can go home now. No, it's a royal command to rebuild their sacred temple.
You know, this decree wasn't just some dusty old document. It was the spark, the thing that set off this incredible journey back home. But it also begs a huge question, right? After all that time, decades of being scattered, could these people really pull it together and rebuild an entire nation from scratch?
And the response? It was absolutely massive. We're not talking about a small handful of people here. Think about it. Over 42,000 individuals, men, women, kids, packed up everything they owned to go back to a homeland that for many of them was just a story their parents told.
And you have to understand, this wasn't just some disorganized mob. No, this was a society on the move. You can see from the numbers, sure, most of them were the general population. But the key here, they had their leaders, their priests, their singers. They were bringing their entire social structure with them, ready to reboot their whole way of life, not just put up a few walls.
And King Cyrus didn't just send them off with good wishes. He backed it up. He ordered the return of thousands of sacred items. We're talking gold and silver platters, basins, the works, stuff that had been looted decades before. This was a huge deal. It wasn't just politics, it was like he was handing them back their history, their very soul.
So they get to Jerusalem and they don't mess around. They set up an altar and get right to work on this massive rebuilding project. And when they finally get the foundation laid, this sound, this really strange and powerful sound just erupts from the crowd. And people could hear it for miles. And this is where it gets really interesting, because it shows you the two sides of the coin. You had the younger folks, right? They'd never seen the first temple. For them, this was pure joy, a brand new start. But then you had the elders, the priests, who remembered the glory of Solomon's temple. And they were weeping, loudly. They were mourning something incredible that was gone forever. So you have joy and sorrow, hope and loss, all swirling together in this one incredible moment.
But you know that sound of celebration? It was also like a fire alarm for their neighbors. When the local adversaries saw that new foundation, they didn't see a spiritual revival. They saw a political threat, and they were not having it.
So these other groups in the area, they started to get nervous, right? They were worried about losing their own power and influence, so they launched this whole campaign to shut the project down. We're talking political pressure, bribes, intimidation. They tried everything to stop the work.
And their biggest weapon? Misinformation, basically. They went over the heads of the local government and shot a letter straight to the new king in Persia, Artaxerxes. And this letter was just filled with these wild accusations. They claimed the Jews weren't just building a temple, they were building a rebellious and evil city to defy the king.
So it all boiled down to this high-stakes war of words. On one side, you have the accusers screaming about rebellion and how the king's going to lose money. On the other side, you have the builders just pointing back to the official decree from the last king. I mean, the entire future of Jerusalem was riding on which story the new king would buy.
And yeah, the smear campaign totally worked. Artaxerxes bought it. He looked into the archives, saw some records of past rebellions, and that was it. He issued a direct order: stop all construction, now. So the local officials march into Jerusalem and, using force, they bring the whole project to a grinding halt. The dream was officially on hold.
So for almost 20 years, that foundation just sat there, empty. A symbol of a dream that had died. But the story wasn't over. A new king comes to the throne in Persia, and two new prophets show up in Jerusalem to light a fire under the people and tell them, hey, it's time to finish this.
So, with the prophets Haggai and Zechariah firing them up, the Jewish leaders do something incredibly bold. They just start building again. They completely defy the old order. And of course, this immediately gets the attention of the authorities and sets up a whole new showdown.
So this new governor, a guy named Tatnai, shows up. But instead of just coming in with force, he's actually pretty clever about it. He sends an official letter to the new king, Darius, and he basically just lays out the facts. And then he asks this really crucial question. Hey, can you guys do a search? See if you can find that original decree from King Cyrus in the archives? And guess what? The search
Works. They find the original scroll from Cyrus. And King Darius, wow, he doesn't just say, okay, you can build. He goes all in. He orders the local officials to leave them alone, commands that the entire project be paid for out of the royal treasury, and even says that anyone who gets in their way will be executed. Can you imagine? It was a complete 180-degree turnaround.
So now, with the full ironclad backing of the Persian Empire, the work just takes off. And 4 years later, it's done. The temple is finished. The dedication was this huge, joyful celebration. Sacrifices, feasts, a dream that was 70 years in the making was finally real.
And you'd think the story would end right there, right? The temple is standing, mission accomplished. But nope. Decades go by and a whole new chapter opens up. See, the building was up, but the identity of the community, that was facing a whole new kind of crisis, and a new leader shows up to deal with it.
And that leader was Ezra. Now, he wasn't a governor or a military guy. He was a priest and a scribe, basically a top expert in religious law. The king himself sends him to Jerusalem with full authority to teach the law and really to shape the moral fiber of this new nation.
But the moment he gets there, he's hit with this absolutely devastating news. He finds out that so many of the people, we're talking leaders, priests, everybody, had married people from the surrounding nations, which was a huge no-no according to their law. For Ezra, this wasn't just a social problem, it was an existential threat. He saw it as the holy seed being compromised, and he just breaks down, tears his clothes, sits in stunned silence, total despair.
But what happens next isn't chaos. It's actually this incredibly organized step-by-step process of restoration. First, Ezra leads this powerful public prayer of repentance. That inspires the people to make a solemn promise, a covenant, to follow the law. Then, they call a national assembly to get everyone on the same page. And finally, they set up a committee that spends 3 whole months going through every single case to make sure they follow through.
And that's where the book leaves us. It doesn't wrap up with a neat little bow. It ends with a list of names, men who had to break up their own families to stick to this new covenant. And it leaves us wrestling with this really tough, really profound question that honestly every community faces in some way. What does it really take to rebuild not just a building, but the heart and soul of a people?